What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with another NBA team look ahead for the 22-23 NBA season. We're on to the Spurs, which means it's that time of year. Paul Garcia, the host of Spurs Cast, and also he's an NBA writer over at Project Spurs. He's back to talk Spurs. I think this is the fourth consecutive year he's done the look ahead with us, so we thank him for coming back and listening to me ramble. Follow him on Twitter if you do not already, at Paul Garcia NBA. That's at PaulGarcia NBA. And you can follow the Spurs Cast. That's on Twitter at the Spurs Cast, spelled exactly once again as it sounds. Paul, the most important question I will ask you on this podcast: how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you? Hopefully everything's well where you're at too.
I am spectacular. Look, it's still preseason, so everyone is in the best shape of their lives, gained muscle, lost body fat. Every team's going to hit the over. So I'm very optimistic. We have not had a chance to talk, though, since the Dejounte Murray trade. And so I'm just wondering, there's a twofold question here: is what were your overall impressions of the actual return and of this organization's decision to be like, oh, we're actually rebuilding now?
I think as far as the return, I mean, the fact that they got multiple first round picks is a good thing. That's what you want if you're gonna move your all star in Dejounte Murray. So I think the package was good for what they got back. As far as the actual franchise, saying, okay, it's time to tank, it's time to, start rebuilding in full. That was a little surprising just because they've kind of hesitated the last few years. Again, we know that ever since the Kawhi Leonard trade, they haven't been a championship contender, but they were kind of floating in that like play-in range the last 2 to 4 years with LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan over the time. And then even last year with Dejounte, they still became a play-in team. But this is the year that they've finally said, it's time to basically reset and just try to grow this young group and basically try to land the number one pick is what it looks like.
Yeah, I just think it was the right time. Dejounte Murray is an all-star level player, but he's sub cornerstone for a could-be title contender. And that kind of puts you, if you don't have a player on your roster who might turn out to be better than Dejounte Murray, it kind of pegs you to the sub-middle or the middle. And I think it's tough to stomach, but it was time to just be like, hey, we need to really just like commit to the reset that we never did post-Kawhi.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, and that's the thing. Like they could have kept Dejounte another year, and just like you said, been like fighting for like that playing spot again. And now they're giving themselves a chance to not rebuild through free agency, but try to rebuild through the draft. And this is what they have to do: is try to hit on these young players that they just drafted, but then also try to hope to get the number one pick here in this year's coming draft if they end up with one of the worst records in the league.
Yeah, and the other thing here too is just the market for star level players is so robust right now when you're trading for them. I would imagine it stays that way unless we get to a point where it's more incentivized for players to reach free agency. But given how much Rudy Gobert got and then Donovan Mitchell later on, and how other star trades have panned out, you might as well sell high, because we also knew Dejounte wasn't going to sign an extension because his salary was artificially repressed by the first extension he signed. And so rather than wait for the free agency stuff to play out to where do we think he's a max player and he's probably not a max player, you sold at probably the peak of his value because he had multiple years left on his deal. And again, just given what the star market is right now, I would say maybe these teams like in Atlanta, Cleveland, in Minnesota, if it goes belly up or something, maybe we don't see small markets be as aggressive as we've just seen them be. And so I think that was also probably part of the calculus and a smart way to look at it at that.
For sure. I agree there.
I've asked this to a bunch of people now since the trade, though. Are there any implications to this for Pop to where, well, if they would rebuild, does it suggest that he'll stick around longer, or does he just enjoy the developmental process so much that he could still have fun losing and then just leave on a whim?
So this one's interesting because yes, he definitely enjoy. I just feel like he's just in a better mood all the time now. Even though they're not having a great season, he likes that part of like getting back to his when he was a college coach of kind of just taking a team out of nowhere and just trying to just develop those players. Yes, they may not have a great record by the end of the year, but at least he's going to see growth in the individual players. So what's interesting though about finally seeing it whenever he's going to retire is the fact that in his training camp and then also just in the first preseason game, he's mentioned these weird comments where he's starting to say, I'm building these players up. I'm trying to help them grow for the next coach who's going to take them over. Now, he doesn't say what year that is. Could it be next year? Could it be 2 years from now? But his whole thing is he keeps continuing to say this in training camp is I want to make sure guys are have the best development they can, the most professional growth process in these next few years, so that the next coach that gets them gets players who are ready to contribute now. So he's definitely finally saying that there's going to be an end here for him, where he's going to eventually retire. Now again, I don't know if that's next year, if it's 2 years from now. We don't know that, but the fact that he's actually saying openly, I want to get these players ready for the next coach is something very interesting that he's never said before in his career.
As someone who cannot cope well with change, I was just kind of hoping that because they rebuilt and he was still there, that maybe this meant we get like an extra year. Like, he's going to be around for at least 2 more years, but I tend to just agree with you. But that was my hope. I was like, hey, they've tried to make it, so they were trying to compete with, the end of Popovich's tenure, and now they're not. But he does seem to just be rejuvenated over the past couple seasons.
Yeah, it's gonna. And just the thing is gonna be like, I think for him too, trying to find like that mark of like, how do you like criticize them when they're like not only supposed to win like 20 games, like, because I could even tell like by his press conference the other day when they lost to Houston, he like kind of gave his normal pop kind of remarks. The team played poor, no physicality. And that's normally something you do when you have like Tim Duncan and Kawhi and Monginoli. But now it's gonna be different because he has to also figure out how do I work with them, providing them constructive criticism. I would say in a different way. So even him, I think it's gonna be a different bit of a process, knowing that the expectations are very low for this team.
I was shocked at the initial timetable for return on Keldon Johnson, just as someone who has dislocated his shoulder before and how long it took me to recover. Granted, I did not have the world-class medical expertise that I'm sure he does. But have there been any updates on his timetable for return?
So he should be. He himself said he should be back about 4 to 5 days before the regular season even starts. And so the Spurs, I do want to note, didn't say he's out for the entire preseason. They continue to say in their press statements start of preseason. So he's not. I'm not 100% sure that he's going to be out for the entire preseason. But for now, he should definitely be back by opening night, as long as everything goes through. Now, as far as why he's recovering so fast, is because the date that the team announced that he was out, he actually says that injury happened three weeks before that. So it actually happened a while back, and now we're we maybe got the news like in week 3 or week 4. And so, again, I think for sure he's going to be back for the regular season game, but I don't know about the final preseason game.
I'm still impressed even with that delay in reporting, because I'm just like, it took me forever to recover from my dislocated shoulder. I would be young again. But so the 4-year, $68 million extension can get up to $74 million. I think that it feels like a steal right now, even if he doesn't change or develop dramatically as a player. But what does his development look like, or what are they going to test this year, aside from, I think he's very much a player on offense anyway, where he's shown he can hit those standstill threes and he can bulldoze his way to the rim. What would be sort of the next step? Or are they even going to give him, and my guess would be yes, just because they lack primary creators on this team, but like, what are they going to try and explore with him on offense this year?
Yeah, that's going to be the biggest test for him, is, how does he create in the half court? We're already starting to see that with Devin Vassell, because this team is really going to struggle to create shots on their own. And that's where they're going to give him the opportunity to try to create in the half court. What can you do with pick and roll? What can you do maybe with isolation situations, dribble handoffs, those kind of things, where he's going to get to show a lot more of what he can do to create for himself or others. I don't know if he has it. I haven't seen it in the past. He's more like you said, he's more a reactionary player, where he either takes that three or he just kind of bulldozes to the rim. So it's going to be new. And unfortunately, because he's hurt for the preseason, we can't see his the initial signs. Whereas Devin Vassell, we can't start to see that because he's already started playing the preseason. So again, we're going to have to wait and see. But this is a huge test for Keldon, just because, like I said, there's going to be plenty of opportunity, and you're going to really see on nights when this team just has so much trouble creating the half court, they're going to really rely on him to try to create for them.
When you scale what he already does to either a better team, even if he doesn't significantly broaden his offensive horizons, that extension ends up being worth it, right? Just based off what he does already.
Just the fact that, the salaries are going to continue to increase with the cap going up year after year. So 18 million, 20 million is nothing. And then for a guy who's a really good 3-point shooter, he was really the best 3-point shooter on the team last year. And then, like we mentioned, like a player who's able to do a little bit more in terms of being physical at the rim. And then he's actually lost weight. He lost 20 pounds this offseason. So Pop definitely said he wants to play him more as a 3 than rather than a 4, like he's been doing the last few years.
Oh yeah, this team's built to throw out some funky lineups, which we'll obviously get to. So Josh Primo is one of my siren songs in the NBA, not just for the Spurs. I love Josh Primo. Are there any updates, first of all, on when he's going to return from his MCL sprain, or how long they expect him to be out overall?
So no, they just like Keldon, they expect him back for opening night of the regular season. So October 19th against Charlotte, he should be back as long as everything goes well. He's actually probably closer to getting back because Pop says that he's basically been practicing with the team. It's just that he can't do any kind of contact. So like they're running plays and sets and practice with him as a point guard or shooting guard. I haven't seen the footage yet, but again, he's able to do that, at least run the sets with them. But he just can't have any kind of physical contact work. If he gets into contact, he has to step out. So he's actually closer just by knowing that. And then as far as like, he's another player where we only got to see one or two summer league games with him, and then he ended up getting hurt or got COVID or something, and then so he didn't get to play in summer league. But he's one of those players who can also have a chance to kind of create for himself for others, and he has that playmaking ability. We haven't seen it consistently enough, but again, he'll be one of those players who's going to get that opportunity this year.
Do you expect him to get like a ton of leeway or experimental reps as the floor general, or do you think that is something they might lean more towards Tre Jones and they'll want perhaps more of just a scoring role or a complementary role from Josh Primo?
No, I think they're going to definitely give him chances. Now, I don't know if he'll start, but he's going to definitely get chances to run, as the point guard, whether, to do a lot more, because Tre, like I said, he kind of has like a floor already where he kind of just sets everybody up. He's more of the quarterback. He's mentioned that himself. Whereas Primo, he has that dynamic to be an aggressive scorer or to try to learn and try to still set up his teammates and, get everybody in the half court offense.
I don't know if this is a hot take because you could probably just name like 8 different players on this roster, but I still think Josh Primo is already, or at least this season, will be like their best option to generate shots in the half court for himself and maybe by extension others, just because of what he can do himself on the ball. There's like a slipperiness and cadence to his game that I absolutely love. And it can be anarchic at times or sloppy, but I love it. And he's so young. And so I've very much, as someone who loves Devin Vassell, and I really like Jeremy Sochan as well, I've just sort of bandied about like, does Josh Primo technically have like the highest ceiling of any prospect on this team at the moment?
I think he does, and that's one of the reasons why they drafted him. It was for a lot of people last year that was that was a reach for the Spurs to take him. I think like 11 or something like that. He was supposed to go like in the either late first round or a second round, and so it's because they're betting on his youth. The fact that he was barely playing at 18 in the NBA already, and he already got that 1 year of development. Now he's running out these other 3 rookies. He's kind of in their same age range, and so I think that yes, he definitely has a lot more potential to definitely I feel like what you said exactly right there. His skill set already with the ball in his hands is to like do different things. It's something already far further than what some of the other Spurs players can do, and it was noticeable last year. It's just that for him, it's going to be putting it together and knowing when to use it at the right time and how to use it against NBA defenses.
I asked Noah McGarrow-George about this from Pounding the Rock earlier in the offseason. Tre Jones, what's the skinny on him for? I think people didn't necessarily understand how impactful he was for San Antonio last. Like maybe they heard about his squeaky clean mid-range game. I called them suave pocket passes at points, but like what's the skinny on Tre Jones?
He's just like you're more so classic NBA point guard where he's going to have that mid-range game like you mentioned. He's able to like get into the paint and kind of use his little floater. He says he's developed his 3-point shot. That's something he worked on. He did take like 3 or 4 attempts in the first preseason game. And so that's kind of defensively he's going to be there for you. He's going to be able to switch. He's going to try hard. He's like I mentioned earlier. He's a good quarterback where he's going to kind of get you into your offense. But he's more so your classic kind of NBA point guard who gets everyone where they need to be, rather than that aggressive type point guard who's either like shooting threes or trying to get to the rim only. He's just a very balanced player from what we've seen from him. And this is a good year for him because he has a lot of opportunity and he's on a non-guaranteed contract at the same time.
I did forget that he was on a non-guaranteed contract. Wow. My guess would be that it would be shocking if he didn't stick.
Yeah,
so.
I doubt he's their starting point guard right now. So yeah, he's going to definitely probably stay.
Devin Vassell, someone else whom I love on this team. I think he's just viewed as someone who's a 3-and-D player, and he's good at moving away from the ball. They did throw him more ball screens after the Derek White trade. Didn't always go well last year, but he has flashed like that in between pull up. Do you see a pathway to him being more of a self-creator or just having a broader horizon on offense? Or do you think this is someone who very much ends up being super duper in his role, but still more of a complementary player?
No, he has to learn how to, to grow in terms of creating for himself and others. And that's key already just by the first preseason game. He mentioned, in training camp that's something he worked on was driving to the rim, was trying to get to the free throw line. So drawing contact. And then, other players have been complimentary of him. Josh Richardson specifically says that in practice, Devin's already been like that player who they go to try to create for himself for others, that he's showing a lot more playmaking, especially not just being a spot up shooter. And we saw that in that first preseason game that he's probably one of the only ones, right, one of the only players right now who can kind of create for himself, just barely though. I mean, like you said, like he gets off a screen, he'll kind of do like a little step back in the mid range, and that's something that some of these other Spurs players right now on this roster just don't have in their game. They haven't developed that, and so it's going to be very noticeable that Devin's going to be able to create a little bit more for himself than the other players on the team, and so that's where he's going to have plenty of opportunity this year. It's just how well does he put it together? Because like you said, I was a little disappointed that once he became like a starter last year, that he didn't quite move a little bit more in his progression. And again, maybe because Dejounte was still playing and they had other players on the team. Keldon had a good year. But this is definitely his start. The start to this season is going to be really big for Devin Vassell to have that opportunity. Now, I don't know if he can handle it, but we'll see how he does.
I did think it was encouraging. He shot almost 38% on above the break threes after the Derek White trade, and he was at like 55+% from one of the corners. Like it might have been, was it the left or was it it was the right corner? So like that's still going to be a helpful offensive player, but we've mentioned a lot about opportunity. I'm excited to see like all these guys that maybe you wouldn't necessarily want in these premier offensive roles to get that agency anyway, because I love some experimentation. And I guess speaking of that, like before we get into like specific questions about the rookies, how much leeway are the rookies on this team going to get?
So, unlike most seasons, this is a big opportunity for these rookies where Pop even said it himself. He says he's just going to throw them in the fire, see, how they do, how they handle the NBA. So normally the route is to send the rookies to Austin. You let them get their minutes in the G League. This year, no, I could see, one of those rookies either getting a starting spot or even coming immediately off the bench and being an impact player in terms of the rotation, maybe not being on the floor, an impact player. But Jeremy Sochan's an interesting player to watch. Malaki, Branham, Blake Wesley, all three of those players are going to get minutes early on. Now, I think it just depends on how they handle those minutes on whether or not Pop's going to keep them in the rotation or send them to Austin. So, but they're going to definitely have a better chance than past Spurs rookies.
I have a very important question about Jeremy Sochan. Is he trying to emulate Dennis Rodman? And is the hair here to stay?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he says that all the fans wanted that bring back the Rodman throwback kind of hair color, and so he did it. He just said he did it right before training camp, and so I don't know if I think he's going to be changing it up during the year, but for now it's here to stay. I mean, that's what the fans want, and he's going to listen to the fans, so he's definitely bringing that back.
I fave it. I'm glad it seems like it's here to stay. Do you have any early impressions of his game? Aspects that you like, concerns that you have, where you want to see him develop, especially in year one?
I just think that, he fits that scouting profile for him kind of perfectly, where he's just that very player who has a lot of versatility. Maybe doesn't give you 20 points a night on offense, doesn't take a lot of shot attempts, but defensively, man, he's already all over the place. He can switch multiple positions. He for being a player who's like 6'8" to 6'10", he moves so well. Being able to with his lateral quickness, he had like 3 blocks in his first preseason game with a different kind of help defensive sides. So like I mentioned, he's able to switch. He is taking threes already. I know that was an area where you're concerned about his shooting, but he made a 3 in his first preseason game. So again, I'm not expecting a lot from him on offense, but defensively, you can already tell Pop's going to like him. He's going to be a player that he's probably out of those 3 rookies. I can see Sochan minutes out of them.
This was one of the reasons among many I was disappointed that Chip Anglin left San Antonio, is I was imagining him working with Jeremy Sochan and thought that he could make a real difference there, because I feel like after he was drafted, because I didn't know a lot about him, I went and watched just a bunch of highlights from him, and it seems like he could be a very good ball mover. Is this someone that they could maybe use as a screener in certain situations and try and keep the offense moving that way? If he had like a jumper, I don't know how you feel about him like putting the ball in his hands and having to make like reads that way if he's putting it on the floor, but he feels like he could be a very comprehensive all-around player at some point in his career.
Yeah, for sure. And I think they're going to use him like what you said. They're more kind of on slash off the ball, or like dribble handoff kind of actions. Maybe I don't know about running pick and roll, but kind of being involved in it a little bit more and trying to move the ball around. Like as far as the shooting, it's going to probably just be spot ups this year for now, and then maybe just attacks at the rim.
Do you have expectations, impressions for the other 2 rookies, Blake Wesley and Malaki Branham?
Branham, I can see him also being a rotation player very early. He's more of a half court kind of player where he knows to hit the spot up 3. He knows he's kind of has a little bit like that Vassell mid-range game in his game as well. He's not as aggressive going to the rim, so I could see him kind of knowing what to do really early on in the NBA. The player who's kind of like the wild card right now out of those rookies is Blake Wesley, where he's very aggressive in how he attacks the rim, how he tries to take his mid-range jumpers. He says that he's very competitive on defense, trying to be there, but I think he can sometimes be a little bit too aggressive, and so that might end up that kind of hinders his performances in the games. So I don't know if he's going to be the player. I think he's going to be the player where like Pop gives him minutes, and then the minute he makes like 2 or 3 mistakes, he's going to yank him from that game, and then you don't see him for the next game or something like that. So I think Branham, I could see as well getting more minutes rather than Wesley. But again, we'll see what they do as far as keeping Tre Jones and Primo there.
Branham did shoot up draft boards too because of his ability as a shot maker, and that's something I guess this team can need. But I could also sort of imagine like Gregg Popovich like pulling like his beard hair out if like watching Branham like really go at it, because like a lot of people have criticized his decision making too. And so I was more so, I think Noah had also told me that he thought Blake Wesley was going to be more limited this year, but that they might give a long rope to Branham, and like that would be really interesting to me just from like a Spurs perspective to give a player like that such like a long runway in year one.
Yeah, so I know, yeah, but like I said, like Branham just kind of fits like already. It feels like he kind of understands the NBA game a little bit more. Like he's more so like, you know, I hate making the comp because it's almost like perfect the way he plays. It's like that Chris Middleton kind of comp, which is what he came in with in the draft. And so he very much plays like that, where he's more of a reactionary player. He kind of reads the floor, sees what he needs to do first before just going and attacking. Whereas Wesley kind of just attacks first and doesn't kind of read what's going on firsthand.
I think the Spurs of last year were a shock to the system for many, like just basketball fans in general, because of how they played. Third in average offensive possession time, seventh in transition frequency, which is just like, I don't know how long since it's been since they were in the top 10 of both, but I would hazard it's been a long time. Given the dearth of like proven, we talked about it, playmakers and shot creators on this team, is that going to be their offensive identity again, speed, or is there like another offensive identity that can kind of shine through here?
No, it's going to be all speed. I mean, they need that because, man, they're going to struggle in the half court on offense. They just cannot create their normal sets, or the normal sets that they run on offense are going to get sniffed out very early by the defense. So they definitely, the players have been speaking about this in training camp, where they're saying coaching staff is giving 1 through 4. You get a defensive rebound, you push the pace, you know, initiate the offense immediately, get up and down the floor. So yeah, I think that that's going to definitely be one of their areas on offense that they're going to have to try to continue to be one of the top teams in is a transition, because like I said, once they get into the half court and the game slows down, they're going to really struggle, and defenses are just going to make it so tough for them to score in the half court. So I think that the pace, just attacking constantly is going to be a big thing for this team again.
Which means that they're probably going to be bad then, but at least they'll be entertaining. Because last year's Spurs team I found like very watchable at least.
Yeah, no, I agree there. Yeah, they're gonna like already, you know, be flying up and down the floor, shooting some threes out in the open court, getting some dunks, some alley oops. But like I said, it's those transition possessions are gonna be really fun to watch. It's gonna be when they get in, when they get in the half court, man. I mean, the Rockets are like locking them down, and that's like a bottom 5 team already. Imagine what's gonna happen when they play a top 10 defense. It's gonna be a tough watch sometimes.
I do think they'll catch a lot of teams off guard with how much they like to just go even after made shots, where it's like you look at the way, and again, I haven't seen this personnel in action together, but like they inbound the ball and they're off. And I think a lot of teams, after they make a shot, think that they're going to get more time to get their defense set.
Yeah, I don't remember which player it was. I want to say it was Doug McDermott or somebody, where they mentioned one of the players in training camp that, you know, the point of going and just attacking after you get the defense rebound is just to kind of exploit mismatches as well. Like they just really want to just keep that pace up. And so that's something that one of the players mentioned, I remember. And so yeah, they're going to have to. I mean, like I said, they're to do that, because once everybody gets back on the other side of the court and it gets slow again, I mean, it's hard for them to create a shot for themselves or others.
Zach Collins says he feels healthy for, I guess, like the first time in a decade or whatever it's been. Did you have any thoughts about his limited sample with the Spurs last year, and how do you anticipate the team using him this year? Do they view him as a backup 5? Do they view him as more of a 4? Do you think he's going to play a prominent role? And I think you start to look at the front court rotation, and my last question is probably dumb because the answer is yes.
Yeah, no, he's gonna play. He's gonna be the backup 5 most likely. You know, again, the question is, you know, how long does Jakob stay on the team? But so yeah, he's gonna be the backup 5. From what I saw from last year, he kind of just, you know, it looked good for him to just be able to kind of just get in the games. Defensively, he's kind of one of those drop back bigs. He provides a presence at the rim. Offensively, we saw more so of his spot up shooting. If he gets like an offensive rebound, he does those little putbacks. And so this year, you know, just already anticipating more of that spot up action in the pick and pop game, and we already saw that by him taking a few threes. You hope that he gets better defensively. Again, being it's more of those kind of like Jakob. He's gonna struggle against guards that can shoot threes because they like to go under and they like to drop back on defense. But you know, as far as trying to be a presence at the rim, he'll definitely do that. And so it'll be just good to see what he looks like in a full healthy season.
And so I guess do you expect him to have like the greenest light from 3 in his career? Because his attempts have always been like, he shoots threes, but like they're always just sort of low. And so do you expect the volume to tick up with the way this team is built?
Yeah, I think think for sure he's going to get that green light too. Immediately, you set a pick, you immediately popped to three, and like I said, we saw that in the first preseason game. His accuracy, I don't know. I mean, the whole team is going to struggle from three, so that's something to watch. But he's going to definitely. I think that's going to be an area where he score, and if not, maybe they will give him some post ups, late in possession, because they don't really, like I said, they don't have a lot of players who can create for themselves or others, and maybe they can use that as an option, is trying to get Zach in the post.
I know this isn't a sexy question, and it's not even one I sent in the outline, but who is the third big on this team? Is it going to be Isaiah Roby? Is it going to be Gorgie Jang? Do they maybe consider like Sochan as a big, their third big?
Yeah. So as far as the third big, I would say Isaiah Roby is definitely here. We already seeing him sticking out. He's getting a lot of praise from Coach Pop, which is something very rare, especially after a 38-point loss. Pop was very complimentary of him, saying that he has a wide skill set in training camp, and then also after the loss to the Rockets, he says he played very well on both ends of the floor. He's able to do a lot of different things. See that he's able to switch defensively. He says that in OKC he was a small ball five who was kind of like their quarterback on defense as far as calling out different sets and what the offense was doing. And then we've already seen with the Spurs, he can have a versatile role of either being like that, playing a four next to Jakob or Zach Collins like we've seen him do, or he can be a backup five to exploit mismatches such as like traditional centers, like when they play the Rockets they had Boban on the floor, so Pop put him at Roby as the five so that they can kind of pick and pop against him and just try to get a lot more movement. So I think Roby's definitely that third big for this team.
One of my favorite things of the summer was when NBA Twitter was so mad at the Thunder for getting rid of Isaiah Roby. And it was just, they had such a roster crunch, and he's fine as like to test out as a third big, but it was just like, come on, are we really getting this upset about Isaiah Roby? I will say maybe there's a chance he's their second big by the end of the season, because my next question for you, which is why I've avoided talking about these players, I'm going to set the over under at 1.5 of these players remaining in San Antonio past the trade deadline. Doug McDermott, Jakob Poeltl, and Josh Richardson. Are you taking the over or the under on that?
I am taking the over. I think that because of where there's contract situations is on two of the players, I think that they have to move two of them. If not, what are you doing? At least trying to get a first round pick at best, of course. Poeltl has a lot more value. He can definitely get a first round pick for the Spurs. And if not, Josh and Doug trying to get a second, definitely aiming for a first, but maybe getting a second. So the reason why I say that is because we know Josh is in the final year of his contract, so he'll be a free agent next year. Jakob is also in the final year of his contract, so he'll be a free agent. So that's why I feel like they do have to try to make some sort of move, not immediately, but sometime down the line before the season ends. And I think also they kind of owe it to the players. The players know that, this is a rebuilding situation. They're saying all the right things, but they know, this is the prime time of their career, and this is the time they can be competing for championships. So maybe, again, I would say the over right now, just because of the contract situation for Poeltl and Josh Richardson. As far as McDermott, I'm not too sure unless somebody's really wants him on the trade market.
I mean, he's still like a good shooter, and
yes,
I mean, he's not going to give you anything on defense, but like he can move off the ball too. Mm-hmm. Two follow-up questions to that though. Who would be most likely to stay longer term of the three? And my gut instinct is Jakob Poeltl, but I've actually been told that and I think even it's in some of the comments that Josh Richardson, who was, by the way, splitting time with the Spurs and the Celtics last year, like he was pretty good. And I've heard that he's also just like really important to that locker room dynamic. And so is there a chance that it's him? Is it Doug McDermott just by virtue of his contract?
It might be McDermott just because of his contract, but honestly, Pop has a lot of belief in Jakob, where he's saying that he's like one of their foundational pieces for this group. So maybe they could work with him on re-signing him and kind of keeping him for the next, trying to get him like a 4-year deal and trying to keep him for those last 2 years of that deal is when they really want to be good again, or trying to compete again. So maybe I would say Jakob just based on what we've seen, but Josh is definitely one of those players who they've used as a locker room presence. He's been foundational for helping the young guys kind of being there and mentoring them. But like I said, he's only been here a short while. He has played well, but just because of contract purposes, I would say probably Doug at this point.
I've almost wondered though if it could. I mean, also Gregg Popovich said they were asking about the starting five, and he was like, "We have Jakob Poeltl, and we'll go from there." So Jakob Poeltl is the only lock in the starting five right now, which I found funny. And just because the center market gets so wonky, you could technically roll the dice to the summer if it's just cheap to keep him. He's not hurting your rebuild, and you could move him later. And so that's also why I've kind of leaned toward him as well. Excuse me.
Yeah, no, 100% agree there. And like I said, it's more so would he be willing to, sit through another 2 or 3 years of rebuilding when he's actually getting older. He has his chance to be in the prime of his career. But like I said, they really like Jakob. They've helped develop him since he got traded from Toronto. And I think that for him to get it, for a team to ask for him, they're going to ask for a high price in terms of first round picks that they want for him, because he's a good player right now.
I am obligated to ask this then. the Spurs, if you're them, how many first round picks is it taking to take on Russell Westbrook while sending out players in that process? They do have some cap space to work with, but like if they're asking for Josh Richardson and then one of McDermott or Poeltl as part of that, like is Russ plus 2 firsts enough for you, or does that just not get it done? And you're like, we need to steer clear of this. Like you could even make it the 3-player deal where it's all the veterans, Richardson, Poeltl, and McDermott for Russ and 2 firsts. Like, is that a deal that you consider if you're the Spurs?
I think you have to ask for the 2 first. In order to take on Westbrook's contract, they're going to have to ask for those 2 first. And then I think that it would probably have to be 2 of those players, more so just to make the financials work as well. So I'd say like McDermott and Richardson is a group I've seen. If not, maybe like Richardson and Poeltl. So I just feel like if it's Poeltl, I think that's even higher. You need more than the 2 picks, just because, like I said, he's a really impactful player right now.
Yeah, and the thing I would say is that if Poeltl's involved in that deal, if it's all 3 of them, I would probably give up the 2 first if I'm the Lakers, because I love Poeltl, even though look, Anthony Davis doesn't want to play center anyway. It's like the fit isn't the cleanest, but if Poeltl's not in there, then maybe it's like, would they do it for like 1 first if they're also getting off of McDermott? But they and the Pacers seem like the most, I don't even want to say likely, but popular Russ trade destinations at this point.
Yeah, I mean it's tough to find trades for Russ, and so that's what it's going to come down to. And then that's actually another thing. Just talking about the trades is like, if the Pacers start making trade moves, if the Jazz continue to make trade moves, do the Spurs get involved because they see that these teams are just going to get worse in the tanking sweepstakes? And I've also wondered if that's puts more pressure on San Antonio to move some of those veterans, because then it's like, hey, we might win too many games compared to these teams, and then all of a sudden there goes your chance at Wembanyama.
Yeah, Utah, and then if Indiana does move Turner and Hield, plus San Antonio seem like the 3 teams that are most dedicated to not winning this season. And so you have to make sure that they don't out tank you. So yeah, it's absolutely going to be a tank off at some point. I think we've talked a lot about sort of the deficit of like half court creation on this team. Is there any other weakness on this roster that concerns you that you're going to be looking at this season?
No, mainly just like I said, it's going to be the offense. I think defensively they're actually going to be not great, but they're going to be decent, just because they have a lot of versatility in their front court with like Sochan, with Keita Bates-Diop, with Isaiah Roby, and then Jakob and Zach. I think it's a really good foundational front court to be able to do different things on defense. The guards and wings, it's going to take them a while to learn. They're a little small with their point guard situation with like Primo and Tre Jones, but I think defensively they have a little bit more upside as a team compared. It's just the offense, man. When they get in that half court, they're going to really struggle, and I don't know how they're going to get good possessions against really top defenses.
And so you did mention their defense. They're like an underrated strength that's not being talked about either locally or nationally about this roster, this team.
Yeah. So, but like I said, I don't want to say, because like last year, I think they were like 16th in defense, and I don't even think
they were taken with a grain of salt because of the time of year, but post trade deadline, they were 12th. There's a lot of like noise in there, obviously, but 12th is pretty good.
Yeah. And again, I don't think that they'll do that. They won't be league average, but I think they'll be like on offense, I could see them being bottom 5 for sure. Whereas defense, I could see maybe in the low 20s or like high 17th, 18th kind of range. So I think they have a lot more potential there. And I don't think a lot of people are seeing it because even like in their first preseason game, they got blown out of the water because they allowed 134 points to Houston. But it's mainly because their transition defense was so bad. It's going to take them a while. I'm not saying it's going to happen immediately, but once Pop puts in his system, the defense kind of stays the same. The principles there, I think that's going to be something that they're going to continue to grow on, and they will be better by the end of the season. And I think that's going to be one of their team strengths. Again, it won't maybe look on paper, it won't look like a great defense, but I think that's going to be definitely the highlight of their team is their defense.
I've also kind of wondered if they could wind up being an underrated transition offense, because now that they're going to police the take foul more strictly, if San Antonio is committed to, maybe they're not, it doesn't seem like they're going to defend and try and generate a ton of turnovers, but if they're willing to be super quick coming out of inbounds passes or just grabbing the ball off their defensive rebounds and running, maybe that just helps them get to so maybe it's not even the transition offense so much as like the free throw attempt rate of the offense, because of the way that the game in transition might be refereed this season.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'm interested to see that now. It's actually something I'm going to monitor, but also, the fact that in the half court, like they're going to have a tough time just generating free throw attempts, and so that's going to be good for them if they can take advantage of that, putting pressure on the defense, especially a lot of those older teams that don't want to be running up and down with these young guys. That's it. Maybe they'll start doing those take fouls.
So, what do you think the 10-man rotation looks like for this team? And to make it sort of more digestible, I think there's 8 locks for the rotation. When you look at Tre Jones, Devin Vassell, Josh Richardson, Keldon Johnson, Jakob Poeltl, Josh Primo, Jeremy Sochan, and Zach Collins. Would you agree with those 8 locks, or do you think any of those are sort of up for debate?
No, I agree with those locks. I mean, Branham is the only one But again, I think that between him and Joe Wieskamp, that's the spot, and I think Branham would end up winning out that kind of matchup. So yeah, other than that, I see like all those players are definitely going to probably be in the rotation this year.
So, and you would round out the other two, just to be clear, with Branham and then Zach Collins, or is it? I had Doug McDermott and Branham. You think would probably be like the round out the 10-man rotation?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, they're gonna play there. Again, Branham, I don't know if he can beat a Wieskamp or how much minutes they're gonna give to Wieskamp. But I think between those two players, it's gonna be a battle for that backup like small forward / shooting guard spot.
I don't even know how to phrase this question given the direction the team is headed, but let's say it's crunch time. They're trying to win. What's the lineup they should be rolling out? And I know it's going to be matchup dependent for them, like probably more so than perhaps any other team in the league. But what would you go with right now?
I would say again, this is hopefully he makes that kind of growth. Is Josh Primo, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. You have to have out there. Probably a shooter like Doug McDermott, and then Jakob as your big, or maybe switch him off like Isaiah Roby if it's like a matchup where like they want to try to get all shooting around at all 5 positions. But that would probably be the lineup right there in the crunch time.
Is there a weirdo, quirky, bonkers lineup you're hoping that Pop rolls out at some point this season?
Yeah, some lineups without point guards where it's just like Devin, Keldon Johnson, Malaki Branham, Jeremy Sochan, and then like Isaiah Roby. Just like it's all 6'6" to like 6'7" to like 6'9", 10", and just a lot of wings and players who can switch out all 5 positions. That would just be interesting to see. They have some versatility in their shooting, and then it would just be interesting to see, like I said, them get up and down the floor. That would be a fun lineup to watch.
Yeah, mine would be in part, I changed it because when you were talking about Branham on this podcast, like give me Vassell, Branham, Richardson, Keldon Johnson, and Jeremy Sochan. Let's go even smaller than what you were initially talking and just see what that looks like. And look, there's probably going to be a lot of garbage time for this team. So why not?
Yeah, for sure. And actually, that's one of the things I'm interested in seeing too is Sochan at the 5. That's going to be fun. I think they're going to definitely experiment with that this year.
So as we record this, their win total over under is set at 22.5. Are you smashing the over the under on that? And I could say, where do you think they stand in the Western Conference? But the better question might be, how many teams could you even say they're definitively better than in the West?
So as far as because this team always whenever it's a low over under, they always go over. So that's what I'm having trouble with. But based on what I've seen so far, this is going to be a really rebuilding year. I'm gonna still take the over, maybe like a 23, but just barely. I'm not confident in that. Now, as far as who are they better than the West, I don't see them better than anyone right now. But if Houston or OKC has injuries or they start resting players, then I could see them finishing with the worst record than the Spurs. But as far as like on a night game to game basis, I don't see a team that I can say I'm confident in saying, oh, they're going to beat this team tonight. Like I just don't see that in the West.
I'm with you on pretty much everything you said, and 22.5 is just so low. And what's interesting about the Spurs is, contrary to Utah, like San Antonio might not have the guy they're planning on building around, but they have a lot of potential building blocks, where Utah, their roster still sort of feels transient when you look at having not just Mike Conley and Jordan Clarkson, but Malik Beasley's over there. I guess Jared Vanderbilt can factor in to the future, but Rudy Gay is still floating around over there. And so I don't know if that necessarily, it could make the Jazz a better team, but I think it incentivizes them more to be aggressively bad, to where, do we see some DMPs for the vets? Do we just see them make more midseason trades than the Spurs? And I don't know that I predict the Jazz would be worse than the Spurs, but that's the team I'm watching. And of course, OKC, I think just by virtue of Chet being injured, and then Shea's dealt with some stuff over the past couple of years. And I just don't have a great feel for Houston. They're like deeper on paper, and they could be good, but they're also just so reliant on so many youngsters. It does feel sort of like that 4-team cluster: Houston, OKC, Utah, and San Antonio. Those will probably be the bottom 4 teams in the West this year.
Yeah, I 100% agree there. And like I said, it will get very interesting if we start seeing some of these teams start trading their veterans and seeing who kind of follows suit. Because like the thing is, like, if they sneak up on a team who wasn't prepared for that night and they beat them, you're basically lowering your odds, like your lottery odds at the end of the day. Like, you have to be very careful about that. And being coached by Coach Pop, he's going to want them to give their best effort every night. And so they may sneak up and win against some teams, like you mentioned there. So that's why it's hard for me to take that 22.5 at the under, just because I can see that the principles that this team has, they're going to still do their job. And they may not, they're going to have a terrible record, but again, they might still beat that 22.5.
It's just so low. And I don't know, again, that they're going to get any worse, because there is no blowing it up anymore for them. Like, you're not going to look at moving Keldon Johnson or Devin Vassell this season, I wouldn't think anyway. So if you sort of have these core players who have shown that they're still, like Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson, they're not super proven, but they're really good NBA players. There's more like blow up potential in Indy and Utah specifically. So like if those over unders are tougher for me when looking at how low they are, but I'm looking at the Spurs, like 22 or fewer wins is just so low. I think I'm going to end up smashing the over on it.
Yeah, no, I'm not smashing the over, but I'm going to take the over just because of I know how they play. They outperformed what their expectations are, just because of Coach Pop as their coach and the kind of the philosophy that he puts into the team.
Is there anything or anyone I didn't ask about that you think needs to be discussed? Any like really hot Romeo Langford takes that you're mad we didn't get to?
Oh, speaking of Romeo Langford, how long does he stay a Spur? They have a decision to make before the start of the regular season where they have Keita Bates' job on a non-guaranteed deal. They have Tre Jones, and then everybody else is on guaranteed deals. And Langford is behind a lot of players in rotation. We even saw it in the opening night of preseason where, yes, he has a guaranteed contract, but I could just see them, he's got so many other players in the wings and guards that they want to give minutes to. So I don't know if he'll even make it past training camp if they're going to waive him. So they're going to have to waive someone on this roster before the season starts. And Keita Bates' job, it looks like he is part of their plans because they haven't given him real minutes, and Coach Pop likes what he brings to the team on both ends of the floor.
And there's no chance it's Gorgie Jang.
I don't know. I mean, for them to make, I think they want him for like a locker room presence, that vet who's like kind of in the locker room, kind of showing them what to do, on and off the court. I feel like there was a reason why they went out and signed him in the offseason. Not he could have gone with any other title contender this offseason, but again, they specifically brought him back and they liked what he brought the first time he was in San Antonio.
I have to ask you this question, like, when do you begin your deep dive into scouting Victor Wembanyama? Like, is this like already you've done it, or?
You and I are recording this on what is this? A Tuesday. They're going to play the Victor's playing against Scoot in that preseason game, whatever
right.
He's talking about. So I'm going to watch that already. Like I'm going to be addressing this every week on the Spurs cast. Like especially it's going to be weird. Like when they're playing and I'm like, look, every week I'm looking at the standings. I'm going to be kind of talking about the race for Wembanyama. Like we're going to have to talk about that every single week. I've seen if the Spurs win this game, did they lower their odds there? Like the scouting's already starting now, and it's just gonna be interesting too. Like how do you? For me, I was already noticing too in the first preseason game, how do you talk about a team that the expectations are so low, and like you don't want to just say all the negatives about them because
right.
they're gonna get beat a lot. And so for me, it's gonna be like how do I focus more so like on the growth of the individual players more so than the team as a whole, because that's gonna be kind of the thing this year. Is kind of even for us in the media, kind of covering them. We know we don't want to say they're gonna get blown up by 29, they're gonna get blown up by 10 today. It's gonna be different for us too of how we kind of provide the analysis of this team and how they're progressing this year.
So I should have asked you that because I've asked a lot of people who cover like the rebuilding squads. How do you go about like measuring progress aside from wins and losses? Does it even go beyond it all? Just what you're seeing from the individuals is sort of looking at like how it comes together in the aggregate, like whether they have a discernible identity, but there's also a challenge there because we just talked about, well, they have to have this like speedball offensive identity because they're not built to do anything else.
Exactly. No, you're right. And I think that's where it's going to be really come down to scouting. I mean, to seeing the individual player progression rather than the team stats. And again, just focusing on certain kind of categories and stats and seeing, in the beginning of the season, maybe like midway through how much have they grown in that area. And especially with what the team needs, it's going to be easier to see like is Devin Vassell fitting that role as a half court player? Is Keldon Johnson able to do that? Is Josh Primo? And so we'll be able to see a lot of that. They're handling it from the start of the season up until whenever we take a benchmark of how they're doing.
I'll be here for whatever content you put out, whether it's a tanking power rankings, which would probably be like a pretty good idea this season, perhaps, or just a deep dives into how the Spurs are progressing. Paul, this was great as always. For anyone who skipped the intro, are you able to tell our listeners where they can find you and all the great work that you do?
Yes, I'm at Paul Garcia NBA on Twitter. My work is on projectspurs.com. I'm the host of the Spurs cast. We also have a lot more video content coming out on YouTube on our Project Spurs Network TV account. So make sure you check those out if you have a chance.
Thank you so much. And as you know, by now, I will be pestering you again in the future.
Awesome, man. Sounds good. All right. Thanks. Good talking to you, Dan.